The Marinade.
There's no O in marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade.
That's
The Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Out on Convent Street, broken window at my feet.
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 83, and our guest is David Huckfelt. David is a singer and songwriter from Minnesota who is perhaps best known for his excellent work with the wonderful band The Pines, but his latest solo record, Room Enough, Time Enough, is the album that has our attention today. Doing the show is always a delight, y'all, and then there are times when you connect on an even deeper level with a guest. This episode is one of those times. I'm so excited for y'all to hear this. If you haven't listened to that record, Room Enough, Time Enough, go do so as soon as you finish this conversation. You can find all things David at davidhuckfelt.com. Everyone, it is such an honor to present my conversation with David Huckfelt.
Short time here, but a very long time gone.
Hey, David.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
I'm doing good, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. You sound good. I think we're all good here on sound. So,
Right on.
yeah, man, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I love your record. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, but this particular record is something special, and I hope that it feels that way for you. And I'm really excited to talk with you about it.
Man, that means a lot to me. It really does. I'm excited to talk to you about it too.
Awesome. There's so much, and I'm just struck by the fact that this was coming together at the time when you're welcoming a life into the world, and COVID hits, and George Floyd is murdered, and on and on and on. And why not start out with the heavy stuff? Like, what was that time? And you're in Minneapolis. Can you take us back to that time and just sort of talk about what it felt like, and sort of, how you got through all of that?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a question I've asked myself many times since then. It's almost it was almost better not knowing or not even having the time to really process all of the different catastrophes that were happening at once.
Yeah.
Kind of a burrow mentality of putting your head down. And I think it just, I'm no expert by any stretch, but having a child tends to focus your alertness and awareness in a way that you never experienced beforehand, and so, I think I remember something that I read that Cormac McCarthy said. What they asked him why he didn't write short stories, and he said something to the effect that if a work of art wasn't gonna cost you years of your life and bring you to the brink of madness, then why was it even worth it?
Wow.
And although that's not for the faint of heart, and I could have done with less madness this year, that was kind of the mentality. It was like, all right, I don't see a world out there that really needs more records or more songs, so if I'm gonna do this, I guess I'm gonna just, I'm gonna put in as much heart and and open up the doors to as many people I love and respect as possible. And I think I didn't, I would say there's up until maybe, the first 8 or 9 months of pandemic quarantine, my son Billy, all that stuff was kind of this sort of tense focus. And it wasn't until the last couple months here where I've just realized how difficult it was, and what a toll it took, and how I felt like I was holding polarities, like wider than I ever had. In other words, I could spend a couple nights, staying up till 4 in the morning, when we had white supremacists and unmarked vehicles driving around Minneapolis, watching at the window while my little, 5-month-old slept in the crib. And I think, whatever you think about yourself, if you're ready for something like that, or if you understand it, or you can't. And then desire to be like, look, the music business is a shamble. It's in shambles. And so if we're going to do this, let's just pack it with every kind of I would say, sincerity, intention, effort, and selflessness, collaboration. And that kind of kept me through. Once it was out, I was like, well, shit, what do I do now?
Well, yeah, I want to ask you about so many things you just said there. And I wonder, you said this in the last couple of months, it feels as though that, you're kind of able to sort of process what happened. And then things are starting to sort of in change in the world again, but we're still back at square one with some of the exact same things. So there's hope, at least on the COVID front, although we're not even close to through it. But then we're right back here. The trial's happening, another murder in Minneapolis. And I just wonder, like, what, you made this record, and just on a personal level, like, what do you do to kind of help yourself process that, especially since there wasn't time to process for so long, and now we're kind of hitting another heavy period. And you've got this young life in the world. What do you do personally to kind of stay balanced and centered?
Yeah. And, if I could provide you with an answer that would make, some amount of sense, but if I was going to be 100% honest, my answer would be, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't feel centered. I don't feel like grounded. I think about, when you offer up your pearls, so to speak, kind of artistically in this time, in this world, a lot of things happen right away. Number one, you know, people are at their thresholds. I'm not saying music doesn't comfort and bring a certain amount of relief and connection. At its best, it surely does. But there's something about taking up the oxygen in the room, and something about, how much self-absorption you have to uh, operate with as a musician to stay in the conversation. You know what I mean? And so I think, that's an interesting way to talk about it. But I think it's always painful to detach, from expectations or even hopes around a record, or and that's part of the reason, I guess. One thing I've maybe tried to do is plug the music in to causes and organizations that I feel have much more urgency, collectively, than self-promotion or music. That helps me stay centered, is by finding a way that this music can be kind of utilitarian at this time, playing rallies, playing pipeline protests, doing online, fundraising for voter turnout and organic farms, things like that, which is still kind of a chasing after the wind, because in a normal environment, that exchange musically is person to person, face to face, in a room or outside somewhere with, what I'm saying, like live music. So I've just been kind of scrambling, and I guess what I do more often than I used to is answer my phone when it rings and it's a friend, or call somebody up and say, I was on the phone for 2 hours yesterday because we had a babysitter, and my good songwriting friend of mine, Eric Koskinen, was. We were wanting to talk. We haven't seen each other in 9 months, So reaching out for support, um, trying to do things that are meaningful as opposed to maybe advantageous,
Yeah.
I guess that's so far been my method. I'm not saying it's all working so great, but it's what I'm up to.
Well, you said, yeah, you said you if you were being honest, you're not sure, and then you just gave what I think is some damn fine advice as to how to stay centered. I mean, I've been talking about that a lot recently, just how much the pandemic has forced me. I don't know if force is the right word, but has at least encouraged me to reach out to people that I love and to tell them that I love them and to make sure I'm making those connections in a way that if I'm being perfectly honest, took for granted before, because I
Yeah,
could, I did see them all the time. But also some folks that I don't see very often because they're in different parts of the country. What this has done is it's made me go like, okay, I've got a great life here. I'm lucky. I've got my partner and we've got our home and our dogs, and like I've been fortunate through this whole thing. Had work the whole time. I've been super fortunate, but
yeah,
we've all been lonely in different ways, right? And we've all needed that human connection that you just alluded to. So what it's done for me is it's forced me to do something similar to what you're talking about. That's just like reach out to people that I hadn't been talking to. Like some of my
yeah,
buddies and I have really connected over this time, and it's made such a positive difference in my life, and has also helped me creatively. And I
yeah,
wonder if that's been the case for you, like especially after, I want to get into the record a little more, but before we kind of get into the record, like there's a lot here. There's a lot of collaboration, as you mentioned. Musically, it's adventurous. You take on covers that like you make your own. It was so interesting. I was listening to um, come on, dude. Satisfied Mind. I was listening to a
oh,
Satisfied
yeah,
Mind, and I was like, man, I love this. Is great. And I was like, oh wait, I know this song. But it took me a little while, even though it's a song I've heard a million times, done by so many people. It took me
yeah,
a minute to go like, oh, this isn't necessarily one of his. He's just making it his own. And so I wonder if, maybe we can just get straight into the record. But before we do, I'm curious, like, now that it's done and it's out in the world, whether those connections that you're making in this way are at all informing your creative process, or if you've been able to write and create in the last few months.
yeah. I mean, that was uh, that was a big part of the conversation I had yesterday. The answer is that I mean I haven't been able to create. I think, um, somewhere along the line, uh, like doing press and interviews and stuff for the record, like we're in we're in a time of what, like, articulated emergency. Like it's very in our face. So talking frankly about it, it's like I think the pressures of wanting to be a provider for a new child
Mm-hmm.
and then losing your job at the same time, and spending resources on a record that's going to come out without touring. It's like somewhere along the line my head got spun in a way where it's just making it across the finish line was the goal, and I remember the day the record came out, I wasn't like, yes, I was like, fuck, man.
Yeah, I
And a lot of
bet.
people don't want to hear that because it's like, you don't want to. I mean, we have enough. The things we complain about are so relative, but we've all lost things this year, So I, just recently, my first step when I start to even think about creating is basically to go back to my Zen meditation cushion and sit and start staring at the wall in 20-minute blocks. That's kind of step one of songwriting. And I've started that again. So I think that fire's in there, but a lot of people, friends of mine I've talked to, you're writing and you're working on stuff. Very few are like, yeah, I've found a way in, or I mean, some people they're working on like they're doing like rudiment. They're trying to, remember how to finger pick, or they're like, I just pulled up all my MP3s my demos. It's like I never heard anybody who's like, I'm just tearing into the substance and crisis of this moment and pumping out my best stuff. Like
Yeah, yeah.
not yet, but hopefully soon.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that process, meditation, at least in my experience, and for a lot of folks that I talk to about it, um, nothing. It gets me ready for some sort of creative process, but nothing ever comes up that's useful for me. Is that true for you too?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's which is kind of, I guess, the point of it, because, I've actually been, been in to see and talk to, two pretty respected, Roshis, teachers here in Minneapolis, and been like, look, here's the deal. I need your help. When you sit in meditation, your goal is to have no goals. Your goal is to have no expectations, nothing specific in mind, nothing to be gained. I
Mm-hmm.
said, when I go sit down to write a song, I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm trying to get
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in the realm of personal expression. So, where do those worlds meet? But I think at the very least, the mindset and the spaciousness cultivated in one can kind of be smuggled into the songwriting process. Like, at least you're not coming there, um, you know, totally fixed. And I mean, it's nice when inspiration strikes and you write a song in 15 minutes, but I like the approach of the spacious mind that meditation can give, where it's like, I think if I'm going to write something, I want to get to the heart of the matter. So, here I am ready to be responsive to inspiration.
Is there a particular, to get kind of granular with that, is there a particular time of day or space in which that happens? Are you a sit down and do the work kind of person usually, under in normal circumstances, right? Not in a pandemic where we're all just trying to survive. But like, are you a sit down and do the work person, or does it come in waves? Like, what does that look like for you usually?
You know, I am a sit down and do the work kind of person, and who would like to kick that habit, so to speak.
Huh.
Um, I the first solo record I made, I mean, was 2019 Stranger Angels, and that was entirely written 2 weeks on Isle Royal National Park, an artist's residency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, I mean, it's not, it's kind of like going into massive debt and then receiving a bailout. It's like, I don't think I would have been able to write. I mean, I wrote 16 songs in about 14 days.
Wow.
And granted, some of them were in process, like I had notebooks, but a lot of them were from scratch. So my point is, I guess, if I had control over my sort of my material existence, um,
Mm.
I would probably not feel the need to be quite so disciplined about it. But as it is, I guess I don't know. Those luxuries, like, it almost takes me getting away and having, even if it's a weekend. It's going to be harder now with a kid, but to really like launch this new mode, and then I can come back to it in the mornings, a couple hours in the morning, and whether it's song maintenance or whether it's reading things and pulling things, I definitely mind my old notebooks.
Mm.
That's at the very least. I think your notebook is kind of your best friend and the representative of your subconscious. So um try to keep that little fire going, and then when the deck is kind of cleared, then I feel like I can get to it, but the deck hasn't been cleared lately. So
Right. Are they just no? When you say your old notebook, mine and your old notebooks, I love that. Oftentimes, I don't do that. I just lost one, by the way.
mm,
It's such, I hate, ugh, it just,
bad feeling.
it's
Yeah.
awful, man. And I'm like, I know there were so many seeds of things that had not germinated, and I want
Right.
it back, and I don't know where the fuck it is, and it bums me out.
I'm
Uh,
sorry to hear that. It might turn up. You have to admit,
yeah,
it might turn up.
true, it does sometimes. It's only the second time I can think of that I really have. I think I've really lost this one. I think it fell out of my pocket, but anyway, the when you go back to mine, those notebooks, are the notebooks the kind of thing that, like, are you constantly journaling, or is it something that's a part of your songwriting process, and then you go back and mine them later?
It used to be that way. It used to be that, I would write every day, and
Mm-mm.
and I mean, it becomes, it's a little bit compulsive. Like, I don't know if you there's a book that came out maybe like 3 or 4 years ago called, I think it's called Daily Routine, and it's a collection of about 30 or 40 pretty famous artists, painters, novelists, poets, and just what they did with their day, and all
Mm,
these kind of, it was pretty fascinating. You wouldn't want to chart your course from it, um, but the point being that something I really believe is, you as an artist, you build a little habitat for yourself with ritual, so um these days it's more like, if I have a thought or a title cross my mind, or a line or a phrase, I just gotta at least get it to that notebook, and get it. So it's like, I'll get a new notebook, and I'll skip the first 30 pages, because those are gonna be for lines and titles, and then I'll start somewhere in the middle, and it's almost like watching a sequel to Rain Man or something. It's like,
mm,
um, but I think once again, I I feel like you store up your little treasures in some way, and wait for an opportune time to hopefully to immerse, and I guess that's why the Pines never made a lot of records, and it's part of the reason why I'm not really drawn to like pumping out a record every year, or being at this high, because if I'm not saying something I believe, I don't feel like saying anything at all. So
mm.
does that make sense? It's kind of discursive, but
No, it
um
makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think the what comes to mind though, the question that I often have when I hear some, I haven't heard anybody put it quite like you just did, but like when I think about the idea of, I always wonder how you know it's good, right? Like how do you, and in this case, how do you know that you believe in it? Because you're gonna inevitably write a bunch of things that you don't necessarily. It's not that you're lying, but maybe you don't believe in that particular song in some way. And I wonder how, if nobody seems to have the same process. So I'm curious, like what your sense of like how you know that it's something you believe in.
that's a really good question. I mean, I would be curious to hear people's responses, but it's definitely not a secret that my favorite songwriters are sort of relentless revisionists, and um, there's an sit down and get to work aspect to revision, like I think even like Stephen King said, you write with the door open, but you revise with the door closed,
Mm,
when you're getting into that kind of surgical world of like trimming your excess. And so I think the only way I can say is like, it's a matter of having wrestled with something, at least in my experience, having wrestled with it kind of to the point of exhaustion, pulling back. If there's 8, 7, 6 verses in the song, there's probably 20 versions in my notebook, or verses, I mean.
mm,
So I think, yeah, I think it can, if it feels like it's good when it doesn't feel like it's yours, or like it's hard to describe, but it's like
mm,
there's lines that come out that that's that feels inspired, not just me, writing like really trying to hook this in, but some kind of partnership. So,
mm,
and clarity, I think editing is important. I've had, sometimes I show early versions to people and ask what they think. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think it's good, and then I record it, and then it comes out and I'm like, that wasn't as good
mm.
thought it was.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show. I just released an episode and I thought it was great, and I didn't, but nobody had heard it except me, right? So like I was just like waiting to hear what people said, and everybody thought it was great. So that's good, and but you need that to hear it in a different way, and for other people's ears to get on it sometimes, in
Yeah,
order to get that sense, like Guy Clark said, the song's not finished until you play it for somebody, right? Like
sure. Yeah.
that whole idea. And so you hit on a few things that made me think about just like this sort of spiritual nature of this record as I hear it, Room Enough, Time Enough. And I wonder if like for you, are you like, is spirituality something that is a part of sort of your creative process, or that you're conscious of as you're writing, or did that seep in through other influences and through some of the guests that are on this record?
I mean, if anything, the I probably am too obsessed with it. I
Mm,
probably like, because that's been my sort of my journey. As a person, I looking back, like there's been nothing practical about my plans for life for going back as far as you can go, into my childhood, young adulthood. I mean, my idea for going to college was to go to theology school, and um it wasn't it wasn't to get answers, it was to ask questions. And let's just say it worked out really poorly, for me, really poorly. And so I guess, you know I feel like sometimes I try to pack that, that's always present in my mind. I was kind of want to go there. I have to admit that a lot of my favorite music doesn't go there at all, and that's I do have admiration and envy for, for songwriters who can be just kind of ruthlessly frank and detail oriented,
mm,
maybe utterly biographical or narrative. It's just not the way that I write. And, you
mm,
know, without like I mean, I've obviously read a lot of interviews with people and, studied songwriters. I think that yeah, Leonard Cohen always comes to mind, like he's, whether it's good or bad, whether you can go along with it or not, he's probably going to take, everything from sex to crime to you know, hunger. He's probably going to take it to the spiritual, to God at some point. It's going
mhm,
to go there, even if it just stays for a minute. So, and that, with the native elements of this record, like that runs the gamut for me. That is the kind of the crowbar that got me out of um, some really narrow way of thinking. And then these
mm,
friendships with these artists, it touches on everything from, the environmentalism and the way to actually be on the planet Earth respectfully, to how to be a parent, and how to, like,
mm,
all my native friends, when they come, to a show or a festival or a powwow, everybody comes, all the kids and the
mm,
grandkids. And you
mm,
know what I mean? Like, there's never not room for everyone. You know what
mm,
I'm saying? As a
mhm.
parent, I just think, like, I like that a lot better than, dichotomizing our lives up. And um so yeah, it's always there. I'm always trying to get at that feeling of, how do you live in this world? That's the theme of the last record, Stranger Angels, is there's another world, but it's in this world. And that, if you think about that too hard, you'll get all fucked up like I am,
Yeah. Oh, I think about it too hard, so we're already
uh,
there. We're okay.
yeah, yeah, I can sense that. I sense that very much talking to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a constant. It's a constant in my life. I actually had a conversation last night with a loved one um, who was saying, who is specifically is a Christian and is an evangelical Christian, and what I perceive in the way that relationship with spirituality manifests itself with this particular person is that they use it to exclude other people and use it to justify actions that harm other people. And I got really upset because it's someone I love very dearly, right? And I'm very close with. And I got upset in the conversation. It wasn't productive. Like, I wasn't helping,
Yeah,
but my being upset was not going to change their mind, and it was not going to help them see my way of thinking. But I also found that I closed myself off to I thought about it all day today. I
yeah,
closed myself off to their way of thinking because I was so upset. I allowed myself to get so upset about this thing. And I realized, like, wait a minute, I just want them to think the way I think rather than me try to figure out where that common ground is between the two of us.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's like, I mean, that reminds me of, uh, they asked Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk. They said, this was back in one of his earlier books, but if you sat down with Osama bin Laden, what would you tell him? What would you have to tell him? This is right after the trade centers, and he said, I wouldn't tell him anything. He said, I'd ask questions and listen. And if
Yeah.
in this world, it's like, oh my God, you either make a judgment and you make it hard, or but you're right, our implicit responses, that's what keeps this deafening. It's not even an echo chamber, it's a deaf chamber. That's what ensures that there's really no true dialogue, and it's hard to talk to someone who's got their mind made up, and the truth matters, so but it is, at least you thought about it all day. It's kind of like a lot of people don't go that far. It's like, fuck them,
Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, "Fuck them," but
Yeah.
I then all through the process of today, just going, "Well, wait a minute." I mean, I still disagree with the stance that they took that we were discussing, and it was specifically about COVID-19, and it made me upset because like I think about how much people, because what I end up doing, and I think a lot of us do, is that we end up attaching so much to our experiences. And in my experience, it's been like I've been so careful, and I'm not trying to be righteous. I haven't at
Yeah.
any point tried to be righteous about it. Honestly, it's just a choice that I made to be super careful. I got vaccinated. I've been doing everything I think, quote unquote, right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everybody's had a different level of comfort with all kinds of aspects of this, and it's felt so real in so many different ways to people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, for musicians, it's like you said, you lost your job, like, and while bringing life into the world, and like your experience is way different with that, and the way you interact with it is way different from mine, say, and wherever we can find that common ground,
Yeah.
it's super important.
It is, and it's not. I mean, I had family members that reached out to me, over the course of the last year, just asking if I was okay, because the posts, the things I was writing about on, when I did on social media, were increasingly vitriolic toward whatever that guy who used to be president, whatever his name was, I can't remember, but
You still
you
haven't
know,
gotten over George Bush, David?
yeah, right,
That's what we're
yeah.
talking
Oh,
about, right?
he's great. Yeah, I love that guy. But you know what I mean? I think it's, there's you know, someone, like, that's the thing. Someone is taking these things
Yeah.
from us, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. If you listen to, the last song on the record is Calling Thunderbird Blues, and it's basically Keith Secola, my dear friend who I respect immensely, been such a light to me. And it's kind of a quick tutorial on indigenous philosophy, spirituality, and it with humor, but um there's a difference there. These, the people that, I guess dealing with objective truth in a time of subjective reality is tricky, but when you come from the perspective that indigenous people are coming from, there's a person with an address who's making money from this pipeline. There is, like, it's not for us, it's not built by us, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, you're mad at looters and you stole the continent, like, those are hot button emotional things, but there is objective truth still, and so sometimes I mean, you can treat someone with dignity and respect when they don't deserve it. That's always a nice thing to do if you can, but uh I don't know. Doesn't I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know if you're, people who don't want to get the vaccine, I think they're wrong. I'm sorry. I don't, you're probably a fine person, but and it's going to, not just the nature of a virus, is it might kill me or
Yeah.
my kid or my mom. It's not like, oh, if you die, it's on you. It's like, we're finally learning through the punishing effects of plague that we are in it together, whether we like it or not,
And that's
and Americans have done a bad job.
I know that's a fascinating thing about it. And I know that propaganda has so much to do with all of this. And I know that, and I keep coming back to, I don't know if we want to go down here, but if Maybe we do. I don't know, but I keep coming back to again, and this is because it's so much a part of my life and where how I grew up. I keep coming back to the influence of the evangelical church and specifically the white evangelical church in America, and I keep coming back to seeing. And I grew up in it. I grew up in the Baptist church, in the Southern Baptist church, and I now that I have perspective on it, and I'm having these conversations, and how much the church has become allied with propaganda outlets that are only concerned with lining certain people's pockets. I think it's so dangerous because when you use a spiritual bent in that way, or any sort of spiritual power in that way, what you're doing is you're saying like, hey, if you disagree with me, with the way I believe, then you're literally going to burn in hell. Like the dichotomy is so strong, and this false creation in my mind, at least, of like one of these two things is going to happen. Either you follow exactly what I support and you'll live forever,
Yeah.
or you don't and you'll burn forever. And it's like the craziest thing, growing up is like I was taught that over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And I started to question it at some point, as we all do. But the way it's been manifested now, I forgot where I was going to circle back with that. But the way it manifests now is in a way that it becomes so political and antithetical to what they're saying, what that particular church's holy book says, because I've read that thing. Right? I've read it a lot, and it doesn't
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
you should ignore science and kill people, and it doesn't say you should exclude brown people from living lives free from danger. It doesn't say that, I promise, for those who haven't read it. But let's tie it back to happy stuff, because
Yeah.
we could do that forever. And
No, man, but I want to at least we must we've been walking some similar roads, you know. That's for sure. And once if you've been there and you made it out alive with your cognitive abilities intact, you feel like trying to do work where you can, and so I hear you. I just say that,
Well, and you said something earlier that that really resonated with me, and that was the idea of like, you started out by saying that songs, like the world doesn't necessarily need more songs, but putting songs out there that are going to make a difference and using your art for positive causes. I think kind of ties into sort of a lot of that discussion, and the idea that like there is a lot of light that can come through in the music, and it's also a way to process that journey,
Yeah.
to because I, the other thing you said that I wanted to kind of explore for a second was the idea of relativism. And it's very easy for me to look at a lot of people's lives and be like, well, at least mine's not that bad, or what do I have to complain about? That doesn't mean I don't have shit to deal with. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I haven't already gone through a lot of shit. My shit may not look the same as somebody else's, and I haven't had the same challenges as a lot of people. I've been really fortunate in a lot of ways, but it doesn't necessarily discount the challenges that you've had, or that I've had, or anybody's had, because we all have those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's different kinds of revolutions, like you talk about, when I say, as soon as I say, I want to plug the music into something meaningful, like my inclination is to also completely counter that. It's such a thin line. I don't really like protest music. I'll probably never do a sing-along in my life. I'm not the person who's going to amp up a crowd. There's like I guess these revolutions that take place internally or spiritually, psychologically, happen first. And I don't know. I don't know. I think that what we forget is it's harder to it's harder to ignore somebody's more pressing needs if you have to see and deal with them every day. It's harder to ignore Native rights if you actually know some Native Americans and are friends. It's harder to ignore gay rights if you know what I'm saying. Like, this is part of why the rural and urban divide in America is so severe, because I know people where I'm from down in Iowa who I would say they have, good hearts. Like, these are generous people who really have never encountered anybody who needed anything really urgently. You know what I mean? Or someone who was a refugee, or someone who would, walk 1,200 miles to cross into the country. And these are some of the most anti-immigration people that I know, down there in rural places. So yeah, that relative thing. I mean, you want to heal yourself so you can be of use. If you're all fucked up inside and you know, I read something the other day that was like, it said, times, difficult times, if when they hit people who are unresilient, it turns us into cowards with self-doubt, and cowards with self-doubt aren't going to solve this batch of 2021 problems.
Right.
There's just not. You're gonna like, um and these are the kind of things, like, to talk about the record and stuff too. It's like, um I mean, you probably know as well as I do, on a good day in a good year, unless you're really lucky, music is fucking so hard to do
Mm-hmm.
professionally, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And put on
Anything
top of that,
creative and
with
music, especially anything creative and music,
yeah,
especially. I'd say.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's so many pursuits where that's true. And on top of it, this sort of compulsion with making things look really rosy on Instagram, or feeling like you need to produce, um like, these things, I don't know, they call into question if you're what's the pursuit? Is it worth it?
Mm.
Are you creating for yourself? Are you creating for others? I mean, I'm just at that stage after this record where it's like, this wasn't a normal record cycle. I would have been on tour, and
Mm.
there wouldn't have been quite so much, I would say, thick smoke in the air, and maybe people would have been worried about groceries and had a little more room for new music or something. All these things. This is my job, So, but I think when you and I have talked now, for 20 minutes about, kind of some urgent, like, some more deeply internal things. And if that's where your heart is as a musician, I think you have to wonder, is this a good avenue? Like, where
Mm.
is it landing? Does it matter? That's like, after you put out a record, that's how I feel. I'm like, well,
Wow.
fuck, I just worked on that for a long time, like,
Yeah.
um there's a frustration there that I've known myself and I've seen in others. And especially in a year when you can't see people's faces when you play the songs to them, or they can't talk to you after the show, or you can't meet them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where's
So
the yeah.
yeah, no. Whew, thank you for sharing that and being so open about that. So what do you do with that feeling? Where do you go with it? Um, I mean, do you have hope that, hey, once I get back on the road, which hopefully isn't too far away, that, I mean, probably seems like forever for you right now because you've been, off of it for so long and it's been such a part of your life for so long. That's
Yeah.
got to be really, really difficult anytime you do something and that's such a big part of your existence and then it's gone for 9 months, a year. Like, that has to be really heavy. And so I wonder, are you keeping that hope that maybe you'll be able to see it through a different prism later, or like how are you wrestling with that?
It's like a thin shred of a hope, where I'm actually thinking, like, as hard as this all has been, last I checked, I really liked, last time I checked, I liked playing songs for people, and and I could, stop time in a certain way. And you just have to, think that's probably going to come back, and it's funny because I just booked a whole bunch of, house concerts in people's backyards, 40, 50 people. It's like, I think after a year of pandemic, it doesn't, I don't need to be, I don't need to play Red Rocks, or, I'm
Right.
not saying somebody else doesn't, they might be used to it, but I just don't think it's going to take that much to feel like we're giving an exchange that's really been missing. So
Mm-hmm.
I have some hope that it will come back, and that, I have hope that the audience will meet musicians halfway there. The audience will be really, really grateful that they're, to be a part of these events, and supportive, financially, tickets, merch, just, I think that interaction will come back. So, I mean, I hope it does. I know, of course it will, right?
Yeah.
Um, But you're right. After a long time of it, if you've been touring for years and you take a month off, you don't even know where your fucking like your capo is, your guitar. It's like, you forget your travel, your toothbrush, and you're like, but taking a whole year off is like, whoa,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I just recorded with Todd Snyder, and he said something. I'm trying to think of how he put it, but because he always puts it in such an amazing way, right? It's always
Yeah, he does.
hilarious and
So
spiritual and
funny.
so funny. It was an amazing conversation. I'm still pinching myself, but he um he was just talking about the road and just how disorienting, I think is the word he used, it can be, and then elaborated in a similar way to you, to the way you just did. He's like, sometimes you just like, you don't know what town you're in, you don't know, like you said, you've lost your capo, you don't like, you don't you don't remember who's with you, who's not, like which van or bus am I on, depending on who you're
Yeah.
touring with and so forth. And it's going to be interesting. Like, I almost wish there was somebody to, and there's no money for this, but I wish there was somebody to like go on tours with musicians and like help be life coaches through this.
Right.
Like, remember
Yeah.
tour? This is what you
Yeah.
do. This is how you
Yeah.
do
Let me
this.
hold your hand. I know it. I mean, that's, yeah, it's not a thing that it doesn't come, I always have this conversation with my partner, and she'll say, I'll be like, I gotta play, this thing. And she'll be like, what's the problem? I'm like, well, I haven't played in a long time. She'll be like, oh, you're professional. I'll be like, maybe, but I'm just telling you that, I mean, I went and saw my friend's band. They played one outdoor show, and it felt like, I mean, it felt like we were all back in high school or something. I'm not saying they weren't good, but you know how it is when if you didn't do a podcast for a year, there'd be some rust there. And,
Hell yeah, anything, man.
yeah,
Especially something that where you're performing and you're exchanging energy with people, because it's not a rote task.
right.
It's not like, I mean, maybe there's some technical aspect to the playing part of it, but not when you're talking about performing music live for people, especially when you're performing music that is going to have this, well, all music's going to have a deep emotional connection to whoever you're playing it to, I'm sure, at least most people. So you're exchanging energy in a way that you haven't, you're going to go
Yeah.
do that in a way you haven't been. And that's a different
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And especially, I've had a lot of people, lately. I mean, I've made a conscious effort, I would say, to be more open and communicative with an audience
Mm.
at a live show, apart from the songs, just the songs. I think it's the kind of thing that as soon as you step into that water, you're among giants. I mean, like, if John Prine would have done stand-up comedy, he would have been just as successful as, a songwriter. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but the interesting thing is that, a lot of people that I talk to, when I talk to them, they say, they don't say, I remember, I heard this song you played. They say, there was something you said at this show, or you talked about, you talked about economic inequality at this show. And I'll be like, I mean, those things stick with people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I guess my point is that I always try to leave room. I don't really write set lists. I don't I mean, I would hope I don't have any canned dialogue. I mean, of course, people say the same things, like you get around to it as a performer, but the idea is that you would leave room for improvisation and for something to happen that night, wherever you are, that hasn't happened before. And, that's part of the reason that I like to bring, people, collaborators along, and even applying to the record is like, these people will probably not be in a room together ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it, once I started with that idea, I was like, I'm going to get some people in here that I'm sure will never be in a room together unless I do this. They don't know each other. You know what I mean? Like breaking down that cowboys and Indian mythology. And there's
Mm.
been some friendships that came out of that, with between some of the artists on the record.
Cool.
It's what happens if you go to any of the Canadian folk festivals, like these legendary festivals that have been going for 40 years. They always do the workshops, which is like, it puts you with four bands, three or four bands. A couple years ago, it was the Pines, Calexico, Iron and Wine, and of
Wow.
course it's uncomfortable at first. You know what I mean? Like, oh, they want us to collaborate, and it's like, fuck, do we really, but I guarantee, I mean, it more often than not, it happens. And then when it does, the audience, I think, is so grateful to have seen something that will probably never happen again, So even in a small, like folky, acoustic guitar world, like there's guys and women who do it so well. And I think that's what I'm partly trying to do is be like, well, my music's, I mean, this is traditional stuff. This isn't groundbreaking. I'm trying to break ground with the writing, but I'm also hopefully something will happen here tonight that hasn't happened that way before and leave the door open to that, that's what the record's about in a lot of ways. And otherwise, I guess, why do it? If you want to replicate constantly, it's, does that make, you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this is the smartest approach, because people can do better by being highly professional, polished, you know what I mean? Like, their shit together, and that can be fucking awesome too.
Mm-hmm.
But for my part, I think the spontaneity has to be there.
That's so wonderful, man. This has been such a delight, and you've given me more time than I could have asked for. We usually end on what you're getting down on. You mentioned a couple of books. Any art that like has you inspired right now? Something you've been listening to, or a book, or a film, or anything art wise that you've been
Um,
inspired by lately?
yeah, I think, I mean, I've been reading this just kind of mind blowing uh, debut novel from this indigenous writer named Tommy Orange. It's called There There.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't think, like, nobody saw this guy coming. I think he grew up in Oakland, and it's he's describing the kind of the modern native experience where, a lot of white people have taken some classes and read some books and want to tell Indians what it's really supposed to look like if they're Indian, and
Huh.
um, that's been a really pretty incredible read as of late. I think more than anything, like, been listening to a lot of ambient and classical music to put this baby to sleep. I'm
Aw.
listening to all these Taylor Dupree records that I'm really falling in love with. I haven't like I haven't really heard any songwriters that I've really been drawn to, except, do you know who Dan Reeder is?
I know that name. I don't know his work though.
I bet Todd Snyder does, because Dan Reeder is even funnier than Todd Snyder. He's just a guy who gave a record, sent a record to John Prine back in the day, and Prine absolutely loved it and signed him to Oh Boy Records. And he's made maybe 5 or 6 of these just poignant, hilarious, crushing. Like, he can be very crude. He knows he's an old white guy, and he knows why that's funny at all, And so we put his songs on. They've made us laugh. He's got one song that's 3 minutes about a fist fight in a parking lot outside of a nightclub in LA.
Yeah.
If you could write a song about that and make it that funny, like, the guy's pretty amazing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like he came across somewhere. I hope I didn't miss a pitch from his publicist or something, like that. That kind of thing
Yeah.
happens sometimes where it's like I'll know a name and then I'll get busy and I'll forget to go back to it. And I'm going to search my inbox and make sure I didn't miss, because I
Yeah. See
swear
if
something's
you'd like
come
to
up.
talk to him. Yeah, you'd like to
Okay.
talk to him, man. But I know we probably don't have any time, but what about you? What have you been into, man? I'd love to know.
Well, I've been listening to, and I'm not just saying this, I've been listening to your record a ton. I've been listening to the new Mondo Signs record quite a bit. And then Todd has a forthcoming record that is, I think, the best thing he's done.
Oh, wow. Okay.
First Agnostic Church of Hope and Wonder comes out on April 23rd.
Okay.
And and I'd encourage you, like, regardless of me or whatever, like our conversation was awesome.
Yeah.
It just came out on Monday, and I feel like he just has so much to say, and there's so much insight. And he talked about that record, and he did it in a way that I wouldn't do justice to, because like it is just totally different. There's like no acoustic guitar on it. It's just like sonically different from anything I've ever heard him do. It's sonically different from anything I've ever heard, honestly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out. Absolutely. Have you interviewed him twice? Did you do one a while back, or is this the first time?
No, it was the first time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna check it out, man. They actually played one of the songs from the record on the radio station here in Minneapolis last week, and it caught my ear because it didn't sound like Todd Snider.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like it's beautiful, man. And then there's some heavy moments, you know. He talks about Prine, and he talks about Jerry Jeff Walker, and talks like there's some heavy moments, but it's just all together it's joyous and it's beautiful, and it's something that I didn't expect. And I love that. I love when, you know, you get hit by somebody you've been listening to for 20 plus years, and they hit you with something that you didn't expect. He could just keep doing whatever Todd does. And I know that they're all not the same. His records are different, but still Todd's, you know, is instantly recognizable that it's Todd usually. And this, other than his voice, it's just like, it's just great, man. And that's, I haven't stopped listening to that thing. And then the other thing, I just started listening to Waltzer.
Waltzer. I don't know that.
Yeah. Sophie Sputnik is the creative force behind it. She has this really cool show called Waltzer TV. It's just wacky variety show that she started during the pandemic. Okay. And then she has like all these wonderful guests on. She's had like Patterson Hood on, and she's had the Colonel. You know the Colonel? Froze on me.
No.
You dig the Colonel too.
The Colonel. Who's the Colonel now? I know the Colonel.
The Colonel. Okay. Yeah.
No. I'm gonna put.
Yeah,
who's the Colonel?
What is Kern's actual name? Joe. Joe is his actual first name.
Okay.
Kernal. He has a new single called "You Do You." He was on the show. He was delightful to talk to.
Okay.
But yeah, Waltzer, she's been doing all this cool stuff lately, and her record came out recently. And it's just like, there's this whole thing going on in Chicago that I'm really digging, man. Like the band Rookie, and you know, Twin Peaks is a band I've been listening to for a few years.
Sure.
And she's doing kind of a similar thing. Like there's just a feel, I guess, you know, that sounds like it's from there. Yeah. But she's from Fort Lauderdale originally, and there's just like these other elements, these punk elements, and these country elements that kind of come through in a different way. And she hits topics that, like, she and I talked Friday, and one of her songs is "I Don't Want to Die," and I was like, "Yeah, me too. Let's talk about that." But the song's basically just like, "I don't want to die."
Yeah.
How come everyone isn't freaking out about this? We're all gonna die. That's the gist of it. That's the gist of the song, you know. And I'm like, wait, no, that's what I think about every day, all day.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's why I don't go outside. Yeah. No, I think, and I would just say too, is, you know, it's fun to share some, you know, some things they haven't heard of. I think without, you know, somebody wrote a review. I think it was either in Mojo magazine or one of the reviews for the record, and it was about, you know, the guest musicians and how the writer hadn't heard of one of them. You know, it was like, usually when someone's saying guest musicians, it's like, I think people expect it's gonna be somebody more famous than you, so that you can, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I want to tell you, like, as a songwriter person, and having talked to you, Billy Settlemyre, who's on my record and wrote one of the songs with me, it's Sedlmayr. This is like, no, I don't know. I wish people would. I wish that somebody with the right resources would get onto this guy. You know, he spent 13 years in federal prison, and that's where he started writing songs. And believe it or not, he has a heart of gold. He's basically become like an uncle to our kid, and he's made 2 records is all.
Yeah.
The songs, and they're so damn good. You know, I mean, I genuinely, it's all I listened to for about 6 months after I met him, and after I heard him in Tucson, just down in Tucson. So this is a guy, you know, I brought him up here on tour for his first ever tour outside of Arizona, and we become so close. But just a vicious writer. Like I'm talking
Cool.
scary good, you know, and
Yeah.
learned how to do it at the first ever prison writing program in the United States at Florence Prison. And you know, yeah, this is a guy who undoes your worldview in about 6 different ways as soon as he starts talking, you know, because
Yeah.
you think, how does a person like this even exist, you know?
Right.
But I'd recommend you check him out, man.
I'm gonna do that tonight. Actually, I'll do that first thing in the morning. I need space to like. This has been so wonderful and so great. But I'll wake up fresh with my cup of coffee and listen to that. That sounds like my shit right there.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to check out this Todd Snyder record and Armando Sanz, and I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, likewise. It's been such a pleasure, David. Thank you so much.
Jason, it's really great talking to you. I think we probably could, you know, talk all night. It seems like, and it's just nice to talk with someone who cares about these things, man.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, let's we'll see where the road takes us. I hope that you make it down here at some point. You know, in the not so distant future. I'm in Orlando, and if you make it down here, or if I get up that way, I'd love to catch up and maybe do this again or just to hang. You know?
Absolutely, man, for sure. Come to Minnesota. Come to Minneapolis. It's real calm right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minneapolis is, man, we're big in Minneapolis. I don't know what it is about, you know, about the Marinade and Minnesota, but like something like a third of our Patreon patrons almost are from near Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
Figure that. Yeah. But I've never been to Minnesota. It's one of the few I haven't been to, or Iowa. Speaking of Iowa, although I'm planning on the Hinterland Festival in August in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
So that's
a good
on
one.
my agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look at while you're doing that too. Look at a place called Codfish Hollow. Okay. Have you heard of that? It's in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. It's a barn, of course, and I think the lineup last year, Bright Eyes, Jenny Lewis. It's something they've done. If they could teach other people how to do it, there'd be so many badass more venues, you know. It makes no sense. The town is like 800 people, and they just treat musicians so well that Gregory Isaacoff is playing there this fall. Like, it's pretty unreal. So you might be able to get there from Hinterland, you know.
Oh, cool.
Who knows who'll be playing?
Yeah, awesome. Well, David, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason.
All right.
Cheers. Take care, man.
The swallows as they sing, they shake out homeward wings. All my relations come and kiss the dirt. The one thing you must do, your heart knows that it's true. Learning all where to love and who. Learning all where to love and who.
David Huckfelt, y'all. DavidHuckfelt.com for all things David, including his wonderful new record, Room Enough, Time Enough. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. Thank all of you for listening. Thank you so much, David, for your time and energy. Y'all follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Tell a friend about the show. Subscribe and leave a 5-star rating on your podcast app. These are all free ways to support the show. If you really like what we're doing, please consider giving our Patreon a look at patreon.com/marinadepodcast. It's a way to just dive deeper with the show. We just had this really cool experience where I interviewed Seth Walker, the great Seth Walker, who we've had on a couple of times and who's a good friend of the show and a fascinating guy. And our Patreon patrons were able to come into the conversation, watch me interviewing Seth, and then jump into the conversation as well. It was so much fun, and that's the kind of thing we do over there. We also have our Patreon exclusive show, Jason's Journey. I give updates about the show. We have polls over there where I ask for feedback and that kind of thing. So it's a really cool little community, and I've made some friends, and I really appreciate everybody that's in our Patreon community. So if you can swing it, that would be great. If not, all those free ways make a difference, and the biggest thing is just listening. Thank you so much for listening to the show, everybody. All right, it's time for what I'm getting down on, this segment of the show where I talk about the art that is inspiring me at the moment. After this conversation with David, I dove into Billy Settlemeyer's work. The man can flat write. I'm going to see what we can do about getting Billy on the show. Highly recommend listening to his records. Just great songs. I mean, heart-wrenching, beautiful songs, and he has this wonderful voice. I can't say enough about him. I've also been listening to Rod Pycott's latest release, Wood, Steel, Dust, and Dreams. Really cool. It's a collection of songs he co-wrote with his friend and longtime collaborator Slade Cleaves, who was a Dream guest, by the way, who we haven't had on yet. It's only available as a CD, and the CD comes with a 32-page booklet with notes about the songs. It's a limited release, and it's not cheap, but if you're a Rod Pycott fan, go get it. For real, it's wonderful. The album is beautiful. RodPycott.com if you want to get a copy of that record. So those are the things that I've been listening to quite a bit lately. I've just finished reading Brandi Carlile's memoir, Broken Horses. I love Brandi, but I was hesitant to pick up this book. And I think the reason why is because Brandi's about my age, and I'm like, how in the hell could someone my age have enough to say in a memoir? Like, how could you have lived that much life? And I should have known that Brandi would knock it out of the park. Of course she has that much to say. What a life. Brandi is the picture of perseverance and grace. If you like rock and roll memoirs and aren't a Brandi Carlile fan per se, I doubt that you're listening to the show if you're not a Brandi Carlile fan. But if you don't know her music, or if you're not necessarily a fan, you'll still like the book. And if you like Brandi, you're going to love the book. It's even if you just like good storytelling, check out Broken Horses. I flew through it. I mean, probably finished it in 3 or 4 days. I've had a run of that recently where I just can't put books down. You know, The Night Always Comes from Willie Vlaughton, which I mentioned on the last episode. And then Brandi's memoir. Just been flying through books, and I'm super excited about it. It's always enriching, as I've talked about on the show many times. If I'm writing, if I'm reading, and if I'm exercising every day, that's how I keep my anxieties at bay. That's how I stay happy. That's how I stay fulfilled. And it also makes me want to create more. Speaking of which, I'm about to record a Jason's Journey that I'm going to release on our Patreon. And it's going to talk about the inspiration that I'm feeling lately, especially coming off my sister-in-law's wedding in Kansas City last weekend. It was a really inspiring moment for me and for my partner, Chris. So I'm excited to talk about that. And I'm going to do that as soon as I finish this and release it over on Patreon. So if you got $5 laying around, you can just listen for 1 month if you want, and then knock it down to $2 or quit. No hard feelings if you do. Thank y'all so much for listening. I appreciate all of your support. I appreciate everybody who spreads the word about the show and listens. Every kind word makes a huge difference. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.